Over the next few minutes, you're going to learn the hidden questions that you don't know to ask, and neither does your kid, that will help you have connected conversations about sensitive stuff. And welcome back to Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul, and I sit in a car with you each week, answering a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And today's answer comes from the courage pillar inside the Evolved Family Method, which specifically is looking at connection. It's not about the age-appropriate sort of conversations to have. It's not about how to deal with our own emotions. It's about how to build connection while you have these conversations. So let's get going. So what most parents do when they're thinking about having conversations about sensitive stuff with their child is to ask questions like, what is the age-appropriate way to talk about babies, for example? Or when should I start talking about puberty? Or how do I talk about periods with my kids, no matter what gender they are, right? And also there may be questions like, what are the right words to use for these topics? And what is the most sort of natural way to start the sentences? And you know what? Having all those questions makes absolute sense because most of us have been told that parenting is a lot about imparting information and skills because we know them as an adult and our child doesn't know them yet because they are still a child. What I've learnt from doing this work for a while now is that I'm focusing on age-appropriate topics and the right words to use, and the easiest ways to start a sentence is an indicator of being a courageous, super courageous, but tongue-tied parent, in the sense that things don't come naturally. We're very much focused on the specifics and the how to do things and the information, rather than thinking about how we're building our evolved communicating family, which I talk a lot about inside the Evolve School, where we have evolved to the next level of parenting, where we're focused very much on connection and conversation, and we're using empathy. And so you will be surprised, well, you probably won't be surprised, to discover that a lot of the questions that parents and kids even don't even know to answer are to do with empathy. So let's get going and learn more about that. The first hidden question that you probably wouldn't know to ask yourself when you're thinking about having sensitive conversations or conversations about sensitive or awkward topics would be, what does my child think and feel about me that I would hate it if I found out about, right? So it's those things that our children might think, things like, oh, she's so controlling, or they have no idea what it feels like to be me, or my parents just, they're so annoying and they just are trying to tell me what to do all the time. Or another one could be, they have no idea what it feels like when they use those words when I'm around, right? So it's emotions and thoughts that our child will have about us, and they all have these, so it's just the way it is, that if they said it out loud, we would say things like, don't be so rude, or we might say, you are so ungrateful, or we might say, I'm only trying to keep you safe, all those sort of things. Because when we can tap into what our child is feeling about us that makes them annoyed, and we can actually say those things out loud in their presence, that is where the rocket fuel of connection begins. And inside the Evolve School, we spend a few weeks on this particular skill, and it's quite extraordinary to notice the change in even how our body feels when someone has the emotional intelligence or the insight enough to be able to really get a sense of the frustration or the anger or the pain that they are causing us, and to be able to speak that back to us. It is really quite extraordinary. So I put that as number one because it is the most powerful question that we can ask ourselves about our child when we are thinking about how we build deeper connection with them, particularly as we talk about sensitive things. Question number 2 that maybe you're never really asked yourself before, and then again, maybe you have. What are the words that describe the emotions that my child is feeling about this conversation we are having? So what are the emotions and the words to describe those emotions that my child could be feeling about this conversation we were having? So that could look like maybe they're feeling embarrassed, or maybe they're feeling frustrated, or maybe they're feeling impatient, or maybe they are feeling scared to ask something that they've never asked us before. You know, and so when we find out what those words are and we can use them in conversation when we are talking to our child, and we could say things like, you might feel embarrassed about this conversation, or you might feel afraid to ask me questions because you don't know how I'll react, right? When we answer the question about how our child is feeling and then use the answer to that question to show them that we understand what their experience is like in the moment we're having the conversation, that is where connection just goes like, it explodes, like it fills the room, it fills the space between you and your child. And that's why that hidden question is so important. Question number 3, and it's a juicy one. Who could help me process my feelings about the struggle my kid is having in this moment? So who can help me process my feelings about the struggle my child is having in this moment? Because there is a lot of emotion that comes up in parenting. Our kids are really good at presenting us with experiences or problems or situations that remind us about something from our past, or directly contradict what we are hoping for them in their future, right? So we have a lot of emotions that we need help with. Of course we would need help with. All humans, pretty much all humans, find it easier to deal with emotion if we are able to speak it out to someone else who is hearing what we were saying, right? And sometimes our emotions can be super, super deep. They can be things like fear of the worst case scenario, of what will happen if our child continues on this route. And if we go even deeper about the fear of what will happen to our child, maybe somewhere deep inside us there is a fear of whether we will survive if the worst things happen to our kids. Will I actually have the ability to survive if the worst thing happens to my child? Because unless we can answer that and process that question with someone who can sit with really hard feelings, we will find it really difficult to be child-centered in the moment where something is going on that is really intense, because there will be some part of us that is just focused on the fact that we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe because our child is in this really difficult situation and we don't know if they're going to be okay. And so we're constantly thinking like, what can I do to keep myself safe? Instead of being able to be focused on what our child needs. Now, that's not to say that we don't have needs. Of course we do. But that is why this question is so important. And I'm going to read it from my notes here. Who can help me process my own feelings about my kid's struggle? Who can help us process our own feelings about our kids' struggle? And maybe when I ask you that question, someone pops into your mind. A deep, trusted parenting friend, or your co-parent or spouse. Or maybe it's your own mum or dad who went through the parenting mill with you and really understand the complexities of what parenting involves. So you've just heard the 3 hidden questions that you probably didn't know to ask, and your kid definitely didn't know to ask, to build your capacity to have more connected conversations about sensitive things with your child. But these 3 questions don't help you if you don't have the resources to act on the answer. Now, you know I run the Evolve School, and in the Evolve School, some of those resources are offered, but particularly the answer to the 3rd question, which is who is around to help us process our emotions, I have the inner circle, which is something that only people that go through the Evolve School have the option to join. And it's the inner circle where the deep sense of community comes from when we have a connection with other parents who are going through similar things to us, who have the same values as us, who are willing to step into having conversations about sensitive stuff with their kids that can bring up feelings and emotions and memories from our past. So the inner circle is just one example of how we can search for and find a community of parents who can support us through some of these really deep, intense parenting experiences. But when we have that support, and when we have the skills to be able to navigate these deeply intense and personal experiences, that is where the deepest connection can take place between us and our child, because we are doing the work to really show up and really be available to our kid, come what may. And that's Sitting in a Car for another week, where I've answered a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. Bye for now.